Today, we're going to take apart an idea that feels completely solid, almost like a law of nature: suicide. But what if I told you that our entire modern understanding of it, well, that it was invented?
You know how it is. In our world today, the script is pretty much written. When you hear the word suicide, your mind probably jumps straight to a medical cause. We see it as the tragic result of a psychiatric condition, a problem inside an individual's brain. And that one idea is the bedrock of pretty much everything we do to try and prevent it. But here's the twist. What if that truth is actually surprisingly new? What if the idea of suicide as a purely medical problem isn't some timeless fact we discovered, but a specific idea that we, as a culture, invented? Let's dig into that. To really get a handle on how we got here, we have to jump in a time machine. We've got to go back and witness a complete 180-degree flip in how Western culture thought about ending one's own life.
I mean, just look at this. The contrast is staggering, right? For the ancient Stoic philosophers, choosing to die wasn't a sign of mental illness at all. It could be a deeply rational, even honorable decision, a way to keep your freedom from a tyrant or to escape some awful, incurable suffering. And then Christianity rises, and that view gets completely thrown out. Suddenly, the same act is reframed as the ultimate sin against God, a crime against your fellow man, and a violation of the very laws of nature.
And this right here? This is the quote from Augustine of Hippo that basically cemented that new reality for over 1,000 years. He didn't just say it was bad. He argued it was the worst possible sin because you were trying to play God, seizing an authority over life and death that belonged only to him. And this wasn't just some theological debate. It led to centuries of very real, very harsh legal punishments, like the state seizing your family's property and even desecrating bodies.
This timeline just lays the whole journey out so clearly. You can see the idea starting as a philosophical choice. Then it becomes a mortal sin for centuries upon centuries. Then, during the Enlightenment, it gets a brief rethink as an ethical puzzle. And it's only then, really recently in the grand scheme of things, that it morphs into what we know today, a medical pathology. So the big takeaway here is that our current view isn't the truth. It's just the latest chapter in a very long story.
Okay, so if the definition changed so radically just within Western history, does our modern medical model even hold up when we start looking at other cultures around the world?
The short answer? Not really. Not at all, actually. When you look at the anthropology, you see that the act we call suicide is used for totally different reasons in other societies. In feudal Japan, seppuku was a profound act of honor. In parts of Micronesia, it can be a strategic social weapon, a revenge suicide designed to bring shame and suffering onto your enemies. And check this out. In South Asia, it's the only place in the world where more women die by suicide than men, which throws a huge wrench in any simple, one-size-fits-all biological explanation. These aren't just slight variations, they are fundamentally different ways of making sense of the act.
And this all leads to a huge intellectual trap, something the anthropologist Arthur Kleinman called the category fallacy. It's like we show up to a soccer game and insist that everyone should be using the rules for baseball. We treat our own ideas, like depression or our concept of suicide, as if they're universal scientific facts. But when we encounter another culture's way of understanding distress, we label it a quirky, culture-bound syndrome. It's a subtle way of making our own worldview seem like the default, the natural one, and everyone else's is just a strange exception.
Okay, so you might be thinking, all right, I get it. Our model is historically new, and it's not universal. But it's scientific. It must work, right? We have to be good at predicting who's most at risk. Well, this is where the story takes a truly shocking turn.
I mean, the entire system we've built, our whole approach to suicide prevention, is based on this one core belief, that with the right tools and risk assessments, our experts can figure out who is in danger and step in to save them. It sounds logical. It sounds scientific. It makes perfect sense on paper.
So to put that belief to the test, researchers did something huge. They didn't just look at one or two studies. No, they conducted a massive meta-analysis, pulling together 50 years of research on this very topic. Half a century of data. And the conclusion is frankly mind-blowing. After 5 decades of trying, after thousands of studies, our ability to predict who will die by suicide is no better than random chance. Let that sink in. A trained expert's prediction is statistically the same as just flipping a coin. The tools we put all our faith in, they just don't work the way we think they do. But it gets even stranger, even more paradoxical than that. Just look at this chart. This shows what happens after people get our highest level of care, psychiatric hospitalization. In the 3 months right after they get out, their suicide rate is 100 times higher than the global average. And for patients who were admitted specifically for being suicidal, it's a whopping 200 times higher. That is a staggering, deeply uncomfortable correlation. In fact, when you look across all that data from those 50 years of research, the single most powerful statistical predictor of a future suicide is having been hospitalized in the past. Now, to be perfectly clear, that doesn't prove that hospitalization causes suicide. Obviously, people who are more distressed are more likely to be hospitalized, but it completely shatters the easy assumption that it's always a safe and protective environment.
And we have some pretty strong clues about why this might be the case. Things that are done to keep people safe, like putting them in seclusion or using restraints, can be incredibly traumatic. In fact, studies have found that up to 47%, that's nearly half of patients who experience this, develop symptoms of PTSD as a direct result of the intervention itself.
Okay, I know that's a devastating critique. It feels pretty hopeless. But that's not the end of the story. Because if the old individual medical model is failing us, we have to ask, what are the alternatives? Let's look at some other ways of thinking that go beyond just pathology and prediction.
So one really powerful alternative is called the open dialogue approach. And just notice how different its core principles are. It's immediate, no waiting lists. It's social. It brings in family and friends right from the start. It's flexible. They meet you in your own home. And maybe most importantly, it resists the urge to slap on a diagnosis right away, instead letting a shared understanding emerge through conversation where everyone's voice actually matters. And the results in Finland for people in their first psychosis, they are stunning. We're talking 83% of people returning to work or school with way less medication and hospitalization than in the standard system.
And here's another game-changing idea. Researchers looking at First Nations communities in Canada saw these wild variations in youth suicide rates. Some were tragically high, others were near zero. So what was the deciding factor? It wasn't individual psychology. It was something they called cultural continuity. Basically, the degree to which a community had regained control over its own government, its own schools, its own health services, its own culture.
And this table just lays it out perfectly. You've got two totally competing visions. On the left is the model we all know. It's focused on the individual's broken brain. The intervention is assessment and containment. But the model on the right, the structural one, sees suicidal distress as a symptom of a broken community or a disrupted culture. So the solution isn't to fix the person. The solution is to heal the community and restore its power to take care of its own.
So after all of that, where does this leave us? Well, it really forces us to pull the lens way, way back and reframe this entire problem.
We've seen that the way we think about suicide is brand new, it's culturally specific, and paradoxically, it's not even good at the one thing it's supposed to do, predict risk. All this evidence is screaming at us to stop putting the individual psyche under such an intense microscope, and to start seeing this kind of profound pain for what it so often is, a perfectly understandable response to unbearable social conditions. This quote from the critical suicidology movement just nails it. It reframes the whole thing. Maybe this is fundamentally a question of social justice, not just individual sickness. It's about the environments we create that can produce so much despair. You know, this whole explainer has been about taking a medical truth that seemed set in stone and showing you its hidden history, its cultural biases, its limitations. And it all leads to one last big question that I want to leave you with. If this idea can be taken apart and re-examined, what other medical certainties, what other solid facts that we live by are just waiting for their turn?